everyone. Welcome to another episode of the StepZen stream. You laughing at my head, Bob and Lucia?
Yeah, well, it's a nice intro. Nice little
Yeah.
addition to the stream there.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this episode. This is the very first time we've gotten all three of us together on a stream. If you've been watching the StepZen streams previously, you probably know all of us. I am Anthony Campolo, and we have Lucia and Sam here with us. And today we're going to be showing off the StepZen GraphQL Studio. This is really, really exciting for us. This is a huge product launch. We had a product hunt go live not too long ago for it, and we've been really doing a big push to get this out into the world to show people the power of GraphQL and the power of StepZen and how easy it can be to get spun up with lots of APIs and start working with them. And before we kind of get into showing some code and all that, I'd be really curious to just hear a little bit about the process that went into building this. I've been helping out with creating content around it and was doing a little bit of QA as it was going, but really Lucia and Sam were a lot deeper into actually building this. So I'd be curious just to hear a little bit about like what exactly went into building this, what were your own roles in doing this, and what kind of you felt you've like learned through this process of building this like huge intense product.
Right. Well, the meat of the product is the schemas behind the queries that you can make in the studio, right? And you can see those surfaced immediately in a little tab that we'll show you in a moment. And it was just really interesting for me to see our team iterate over and over again on each schema and curate it to make sure that they were easily usable, like well documented, that there were mock data was available on each one, and just the way that each schema was carefully curated to make sure that it would be easy for the developer to use was super interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. The meat of the project is definitely the schemas, and that's a big reason why we wanted to be able to kind of give this what I like to think is like a big time way of sampling all these different APIs at a very, very quick pace for people that otherwise may not know how APIs can influence a project, and be a factor in their development process, and maybe consider, okay, maybe I want to do a CMS like Contentful or Airtable or something like that that may hold my data and source it. But what will I actually be doing, and what does GraphQL provide? That's where you can see these things in action, and the power of you being able to actually add your configurations and being able to see your own keys and being able to take that schema and just run it right away. It's pretty powerful, even before having to actually sign up for StepZen, which then enables you to do more with it and actually tie data together, which we also sample there and we'll show in the combination section. So It's really cool.
And the schemas that you mentioned, the ones that were more content focused, those presented a very interesting engineering problem in terms of selecting sample queries, right? Because you couldn't write the sample queries and request them by any parameter that would be specific to the data set, if that makes sense. Like if you had a table and it had you name it like Lucia's table inside your Airtable CMS or something, you can't fetch by the table name. You have to figure out ways to make sample queries work that return models or schemas that we know will be in every CMS. So that was one really interesting part of the project to me.
Yeah, what are some of the schemas you both built out in terms of like what were the integrations, like what are the endpoints were you kind of like building out?
Like which one specifically?
Just like I'd say some of the ones that maybe are like some of your favorites. I'm sure I think you both did quite a few. So like where some kind of stuck out.
I don't know if I remember which ones exactly. Yeah. I really liked Spotify was a big one that I did. I learned a lot about kind of consolidating a schema because we auto-generated the schema from the REST API, and then we ended up with a lot of repeated types. So I got some help from other members of the team at just kind of removing some of the fluff there, and that was a good lesson that I learned doing that one. Some of the ones that I enjoyed doing were like the Studio Ghibli one, where it's just like, oh, the content of this is so fun, and it's such a good simple example of what this studio can do that it was just fun to make.
Yeah. I built out specifically like one that I thought was pretty valuable that I wanted to be able to bring forward and was pretty big too was the HubSpot one. And I spent some time on that one because I just think CRMs are something that everyone is really grabbing attention towards, especially like web-based. Like we didn't do Salesforce because Salesforce API is something of its own, but we did HubSpot because we had familiarity with it, and specifically I did. So I built that out, and I just thought it would be really resourceful to be able to see like all the different ways that you can tie your CRM, because a lot of times what CRMs are doing today is talking about all the different ways you can integrate it with all these other tools and processes on other platforms and other third parties. So being able to bring that in and see your own data coming into that from a GraphQL source, and then seeing all the potential capabilities and integrations you could do yourself just by linking directly through a GraphQL schema was something that I thought would be pretty cool and powerful. But then other than that, like building out just fun ones is what we kind of wanted to do for combos on here to show sampling of that. And you have fun ones on there that was good to do. Like we'll be showing today, like Google Maps and Yelp, which just allows you to be able to see different ratings from different sites and see, okay, what restaurant do I want to go to, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's cool because we have a huge range of different APIs, from like the kind of like fun and like hooky and to the like actually real, very useful, like high value for businesses. Because like, you've been doing HubSpot work just for StepZen itself, and so I know you've gotten very deep into their API, and so you already see the value that a company can get from it. So it makes a lot of sense that you can look at like the tools that we are using ourselves as developers, and then think like, how do we actually make this simpler for other developers who also need to use these tools? And the process of like going through just figuring out like even one single API, like it is just so much work, like digging through the docs and figuring out how each bespoke API works. And like all of us have gotten like a lot of experience with that working at, an API company. And so it's really great to have built something that is something I think is really very useful and can save people a lot of time. So we're very excited to share this with you. I'm going to go ahead and screen share here. And I already dropped a link in the chat for this. This is at graphql.stepzen.com, and this is our GraphQL Studio. So if we see here on the left, we have a list of all of our schemas, and both of you feel free to hop in with any comments or clarification as I'm going. We have a wide range of schemas, some of which you're almost certainly familiar with, some of which you may not be. And then we also have these combinations over here, and the combinations involve lots of different ones that are already provided in the schemas, but then are kind of connected together. And to just start, I'm going to just pull a couple schemas together, and then we're going to get more into the combinations as we go on. So there's different levels of like how much authentication goes into some of these APIs. So to start off, we're going to use one that doesn't really require any API keys at all. We just have the Pokemon API. Most people are familiar with some sort of like, Pokemon.
Ever done an API tutorial? Probably.
Everyone loves their Pokemon. Yeah. And you have two things here. We have our queries and we have our schema. And so this is one of the things I really like, is that you can just go see the schema. And like, even if you weren't to use the studio at all, like you just copy paste these schemas and get like all these GraphQL schemas like already created for you. Like it's amazing how much work the team has done for you by just creating these schemas. And if we look here at the actual query type, we can see these are some of like the StepZenisms that we use to make this work. This one specifically, we're not using the Pokemon REST API. If you have done this before, you likely have used that, but this is actually, there's a GraphQL Pokemon API that is on GraphCDN, and we can feed it into our @GraphQL directive, and then we're able to prefix it so it doesn't get confused if we have another Pokemon endpoint for some reason that we're also bringing in. But if we look at our query now, we start off by giving you just a nice sample query here that you can run and you can get results back. This is a pretty big result object here. So I'm going to pare this down a little bit. Instead of getting the Pokemon's abilities, let's just get a list of the Pokemons. Let's just get their name, and then let's only pull in 5 of them. So now we're going to see that we're only getting a small list of just a handful of Pokemon. So you already see we have conventions here for how much of the data you want to bring in terms of like the pagination and things like that. So you can limit it. You don't want to get every single Pokemon all at the same time. We just want to get 5. And then we can also just check out some autocomplete as well. You hold control space and then you get all sorts of information in terms of what can you actually do with this. So that's all really, really sweet.
Yeah, and another place where if you ever want to be able to see all the fields you can return, you can check in that schema as well, or you can head over to that documentation. That'll kind of a little jump to a preview there, but you're able to kind of go through there and it would be able to provide all the fields as well to where you can check it out and see what else you want to pull in case if, previews sometimes don't pull in all the fields. So got to make sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is a common thing. If you're someone who's worked with other GraphQL, like these kind of GraphQL Explorer, GraphQL Playground, there's a lot of different terms for a lot of this should be fairly intuitive. We've really built it out to be a whole suite of tools, but in terms of just giving you the docs and giving you autocomplete and things like that, this is all fairly standard stuff. And so we see here, we're looking at the Pokemons, and then we have this results object, which returns the Pokemon item. And then there we can grab things like the name and the image and the ID and things like that. So now that we've got that, the really great thing about StepZen and what makes StepZen such a unique platform is that it allows you to take multiple different endpoints and combine them all into one unified graph. And so if we wanted to then bring in the SpaceX API, so this is another common API as well. And we only, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that out and I'm just going to grab this for a second.
And you're moving like quick right there, but really it's just like, this is just any standard graphical where you can make any modifications on it that you want, and you can move things around and inject Pokemon into SpaceX query for say right here and be able to just run it exactly as that. It's entirely customizable to be able to do this kind of stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So now we're seeing here, we got the SpaceX coming in, but I also want to be able to say query both of them at the same time. So if we just take this one big query and we insert our Pokemon's query and our SpaceX query, we can then run this and then we get everything back together. So right now we can see that all of the work of combining these schemas, stitching them together, allowing you to have a unified interface, it's all taken care of for you. And this is especially nice if you're a front-end developer, because then if we wanted to say, just take this query and throw it into like a fetch call in a use effect in a React app, all of a sudden we have instantly the data we need for our front end. We didn't have to create the schema. We didn't have to even create the query types. We have everything we need to just start writing the queries and getting the data back. And then beyond this, what's really cool is we also have a whole endpoint that's already deployed for you. So if you grab this here and then pop it open in a new tab, now we're looking at, this is our specific endpoint that has been created for us. So if we wanted to curl this endpoint, or if we wanted to hit it with insomnia or anything like that, we could do that as well. And it even filled in our query for us. So now we're seeing that we can get this back over here. And then the last thing that I want to show before I hand it off to Lucia is, if you've ever worked with StepZen before, you have probably created some sort of projects that has like an index.graphql and some schema types and all of that. And if you wanted to auto-generate that from this endpoint you've created, you can just click publish, and then you can download this and it zips it up for you. You can open up this zip in your favorite code editor, and then we can actually see all of the code that goes into creating this. And my computer decided to poop itself for a second. And now we can see our actual project of everything that goes into it. Sorry about that construction noise also, by the way. I'm in the very noisy city of Oakland right now, but about to pass it off. So we see here,
it's sound effects because you're building something.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
That's hilarious. And so if we look here in our index.graphql, you can kind of see how the StepZenisms work. It already took these different files and basically combined them all together into this one endpoint for us. And then we have these configs to connect. If we are actually importing keys, then that's where our keys would be as well. And then we can see the schemas, which we were looking at before, with our endpoints that from the SpaceX endpoints and from the Pokemon endpoints. So that is kind of the first step that we wanted to show you. And then want to also show you how to do some more complex things with keys and things like that. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then you can go ahead and take it away from here, Lucia.
Yeah. I also wanted to add, if you're not familiar with that, at GraphQL syntax, that's because that's a StepZen specific capability. It's a directive that you get to use when you use the StepZen service that makes it very easy to consume other GraphQL APIs.
Also, hey to all the friends in the chat. Thanks for hanging out, everybody.
Yep, I replied to some, but I accidentally replied on YouTube and Twitch for some of them. So now everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, people on YouTube are like, what?
Yeah. Isaac's like, I'm not talking about Pokemon.
Yeah. So here we've got the Unsplash API selected. I'll just go to unsplash.com real quick to show you what it is in case you're not familiar. It's a free image kind of resource, and there are a lot of very beautiful images is available. I use this in my own demo projects all the time just to use kind of like placeholder images. So the API itself is very useful, except I realized I was only sharing that tab. Maybe Anthony can drop the website in the chats so you guys can check it out. You can see here we're running a bunch of queries on the Unsplash API. We're looking at the stats for a specific client and seeing how many new developers and new requests are there. We're looking at collections and getting a bunch of fields back there, stats, and then search, which we'll look at in a second. But first, I just wanted to show you how to use an API that requires keys inside the StepZen Studio. This is a good example of that. So you would hit configure, and here you enter your Unsplash client ID. And the nice thing about using the StepZen Studio is the GraphQL implementations here specifically kind of leveled the playing field on the different APIs that we use, especially the REST ones, because sometimes in your authorization header, you have to double check and make sure that you're sending the right prefix, right? Like sometimes you need bearer, other times it's API key. With Unsplash, it's client ID. But anytime you use one of these StepZen endpoints inside the GraphQL Studio, all you have to do is put in the secret. And
then there's a question: is this something that you're getting like from the Unsplash API?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Cool. This is not the StepZen key here. So that's because in order to get a StepZen key, you'd have to sign up, but you do not need to sign up for StepZen in order to use the Studio. Your keys are definitely secure. They're never stored on StepZen. They're in local storage on your machine. So you don't have to worry about that. Let's take a look at Unsplash search here. Oh. Must be missing a bracket somewhere. I'm gonna do this kind of ploddingly, one at a time. Okay, so we see that we get back all of this data on all of the pictures that correspond to the query read. So this is like going to the Unsplash homepage and searching read. And then you can see here, there's links that you can use. So you can immediately think, oh yeah, if I were building a user interface, I would probably go in and grab, say, the HTML URL here or this URL here, and then I could surface this. Let's try another query and see the response. Cool. Let's see if I can find, let's try that one. So this I queried for Snowflake. So if I enter this into the browser, we should get a picture of a snowflake. There we go. In fact, next month, I'll be releasing Advent of GraphQL challenges once a day, and we'll be building a project that uses the StepZen GraphQL Studio to surface a random snowflake with the Unsplash API to a user interface. So I keep your eye out on social for that. And that's all I've got for this API. I'm going to catch up on questions here.
Yeah, no questions. Just Travis acting a fool like usual. He
Hi,
wanted to see your
Travis.
keys.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was great. So what do you think would be like a good use case for this in terms of like actually bringing this into like a real application?
You could combine it with the results of another application. Say if you got like a query string, I don't know, from the Pokemon API and had the name of Pokemon, you could feed that in with StepZen directive. The first one that comes to mind is at sequence for that one, which Sam can also tell us about. But and return a photo that corresponded to that search, say, for your Pokemon, for your web page. You could also probably use that for like a Twitter tweet. See what random images come up for the text of your tweet.
Yeah, there's a new Twitter API, I hear. It's all the buzz.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. Yeah,
it's exciting. I think you can tweet from it, which I don't think you could have done before.
So. Yeah, and it has a lot of capabilities with the threads, to where you can now, I think, look at threads and then possibly even tweet threads, which you couldn't do previous. So essentially commenting on your own tweets. Yeah. TBD, that's the saying. But I saw that Travis wants to do an Instagram and Twitter one. So now the capabilities are limitless. So maybe we'll have to bring Instagram in.
Yeah. Yeah. We should see if we can build the recursive tweet with StepZen. That would be fun.
What's the recursive tweet?
There, you can retweet your own tweet with a single post to the API. There's like I've only seen like two different ways of doing it.
He retweets his own tweets. So I'm like, you can do that? You're allowed to do that? Just retweet your own tweet? Really?
Yeah, but the thing with the recursive tweet is that it's one tweet. That's both a retweet and the original one. So it's like the Ouroboros of tweets. It's a pretty fun like developer problem.
All right, my turn.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Cool. So moving you guys over here so I can see my screen. And I'm pulling up the same exact thing. And what we got here is the GraphQL Studio, so we all know. And then all I'm going to be doing is go into the combo section. And we have a lot of different combinations that you can go in and do here that was built by individuals all throughout our team. That is just supposed to be fun, right? A little bit more on the idea of fun and seeing how you can bring together really popular APIs that we have in here to be able to bring together. But some of them can be really useful, right? Like social media sentiment analysis, if you wanted to get into something like that. And I didn't build that one out, but I think it analyzes tweets and allows you to also maybe do the dev2 where you would bring it in and maybe be able to do, I think it maybe analyzes the dev2 articles as well, if I'm not mistaken. So you can do a lot of different things in here. I think the local currency by IP is actually the example one that we allow us to be able to pop up here. So you can see currencies by IP address as you would bring that in. But the one I'll be showing today is Google Maps and Yelp reviews. So if you pop that in right away, you're going to see that it brings in 2 rather than just if you were to go all schemas, bringing in 1. And the difference is there is that we're bringing in together 2 individual schemas that are now going to be in one large schema, right? So Google Maps and Yelp are all going to come together into a pretty large schema. And then if you go back into the query, you can see that we have 3 individual queries in here of StepZen query, Google Maps query, and Yelp query. Now, the difference here and why we have 3 is because the Google Maps is let alone individual Google Maps, right? So it brings in all the Google Maps APIs, which in this case was REST. And we're bringing in the Google Maps ones like finding a certain destination, finding a geocode, and then finding places, yada, yada, yada. A lot of different types of queries that you can run and execute and be able to get different results. Yelp, same way, where we have different examples in here that we kind of did, but we have Yelp Business that's coming in. And if you were to run this one, you'd entirely be able to get it all based on your Yelp API. So we just have one key for each of these, right? Well, the big thing about a combo and what we want to be able to provide for individuals that want to see data come together using some of the cool functionality with StepZen directives is the StepZen queries. And what this does is allows us to be able to bring together both of these, I would say, schemas, the Google Maps schema and the Yelp schema, combine them into one, and then use the app materializer in this case, which is a StepZen directive that puts Yelp businesses directly underneath the Google Maps text search. And so in this case, you know, we'll be able to see a text search as if you were to, similar how Lucia was showing with Unsplash, where if you were to do a search for London, UK, you would get types that would come back in response and then name, and you'd be able to get a list of different names that are based in London, UK, right? We're going to be doing mock on this one. So we're not going to be seeing data that's entirely relevant to London when we get in response, but it's kind of will allow us to see what the response would look like. And then over here, we'll pop in our little configure keys and we'll be able to see some data tied together. That's pretty cool. So if I were to do it right now and run it, right, we wouldn't get anything because we don't have mock and we don't have configurations. So as expected, we get no data in response. Let's do mock. And then you can see that the configurations go away. It doesn't expect it anymore because we're just going to get mock data in response. Pop in, awesome. Tacos, obviously, mock, cool. But it's, it still shows, okay, formatted address, we're still going to expect an address. Ratings, so this is what we're going to kind of be able to see side by side, is Google is going to be able to provide us a rating, as well as Yelp is going to be able to provide us ratings and be able to see those in comparison with one another. And then we have reviews, yada, 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 mock stuff. But we know that it's coming in and we're like, okay, this is a similar response that we would get if we wanted to actually use this data on our front end to be able to compare Google businesses with Yelp businesses, right? And be able to see the reviews coming in associated with a Google business that we're looking at. So let's say we now remove the mock, right? And we add the configuration. Travis isn't going to get it. Nice try. And come in, pop that in there. Save, it'll always say, try to save it there. No. So if we were to run this, right, now we'd be able to get Google Maps query. That comes in, that's awesome. So I won't go through each individual field here. If you guys, Lucy and Anthony, if you guys want to ask about anything specific here, but really what we're going to be able to notice is that with this, we're going to be getting latitude and longitude, which is going to be an argument that we're going to be able to pass into our business to be able to identify businesses in the same region of Google Maps, right? For when we want to be able to associate them, we'll be doing it by the latitude and longitude that we pass in. And that's all going on with the directive that you can take a peek at. And if Lucy or Anthony, you want to share that in the chat on how you can actually tie those two together by the fields that we get from the top that go down into the bottom. But as you can see, we probably won't be getting anything if we were to run steps and queries here in Yelp businesses, and that makes sense. And we get connector HTTP unauthorized. And why do we get that? Well, it's because we don't have Yelp configured. So let's configure it and let's see what we get in response. You guys, any questions or anything on this point? I got you over here, so I'm looking at that.
Yeah, how would you use this to find good taco places?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to do tacos in this one. I'm going to do sushi in Coconut Grove, Miami. That's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
But we'll be able to see it. So so let's go. And then obviously the mock's not added, so we have both configurations in. So I want to change it to do sushi in Coconut Grove, Miami. Right. So this is just a little neighborhood just south of me. And let's say we want to also be able to include ratings, right, on our Google Maps text search. So let's go into here and let's take a quick peek. I think it's somewhere near text search, right? So we go into here and we want to be able to see if ratings is available, right? So we're like, awesome, ratings is available. It's a float. So we'll do that. Then we can also do price, which I think was level. There we go. Cool. Booyah. Sushi Maki. So we get type and response from Google Maps text search. It's a restaurant, it's food, it's a point of interest and establishment, which Google is like, this is important to you, to me. I just want to know that it's a food and a restaurant, right? So cool. Name, Sushi Maki. Rating, 4.3. Price level, 2. So that's like the little dollar signs that you normally see. And then Yelp businesses. And then we have each individual business that comes in associated with that longitude and latitude, the area, right? So we're going to come under the assumption that this is probably the same one. Sushi Maki right here. That's the address that it is. And we can see that it's in Miami, Bayshore Drive, which I know that that is in Coconut Grove. I won't say the neighborhood, but I think at 3.5 is the rating. So now you can see it's a little bit more critical on Yelp. But then you're able to see the reviews in here. You know, they're really good wonton and with really heavy heart. Some people are some serious Yelp critics. If you know some Yelp critics out there, everyone's a Yelp critic. So, but it can be really helpful. And you find out more things as you keep going. And it's an array that comes in just in case if you want to see if anything may be similar to other destinations and things like that. But you probably just need to be able to source the first one and understand that this is going to be the same restaurant of the businesses that you're querying in based on that location that you give it. Yelp is probably giving us other ones in the area that's very similar. Maybe you just want to source the first one. You can do that by going in and downloading this, right? And being able to take that down and then spin up an account and, turn that array into a single response and only ask for the individual first one of that array, and you're probably going to get the same result. So, yeah. And then if we were to take this and we want to run something very similar, just like this over in Postman, we can come over here and we can punch that in. And I already sampled it right here. And we can just drop all the other queries. Make sure we get rid of everything that we don't want here because we just want the integration query right here. So as Anthony was saying, you could just put this directly in as a fetch call on your front end and be able to see this on your front end and be able to use it to provide users on your site the opportunity to compare this business on multiple different APIs like Yelp and Google, and then you run it and it's open and accessible because it's a unique endpoint, and you get the same exact, I didn't change this from London, UK. So let's go, did it refresh when I came back? Yeah, it did. So we can just change it here, right? And we can go, hopefully I won't hit a rate limit, and let's go sushi in Coconut Grove. There we go. Sushimaki. And then you keep coming down, and it looks like we did get a null on that one. So it's just a matter of sometimes the rate limit came in, but you're able to have Asian Thai Kitchen. So rate limit on this one, but in the one previous, we saw that we didn't get the rate limit. And it kind of comes back and forth, but that's really the idea, right? So there we go, Sushimaki coming in, and that's just, Yelp saying, hey, you're pinging us too many times, which can happen. So you have to find a way of throttling that, which, like I said, you can come in and hit a single one and be able to pull in the individual first one. Sushimaki, same exact results you expect here.
And do you know if we were to do this within the studio interface itself, would those results be cached to save you from these kind of like rate limiting issues?
So we have cache policy in the @REST, and for @GraphQL, I'd have to see if we have the same kind of cache for it. But I know we have a cache policy, and you can make it. I know it's like you have settings that can be like on, off, default, or like strict or something like that. That enables you to be able to be like, yes, I just want this to stay and be cached for the next response to come in, unless if something you think has identified or been changed. Yeah, you can.
Cool. Yeah, because that's definitely one thing that is nice to get a little bit of help with, because as someone who plays a lot of APIs, you end up hitting these kind of issues, especially when like free APIs. If it's a paid API, they'll let you hit as much as you want because you're paying for it. But
I definitely don't have a paid Yelp API. So yeah, that'll definitely happen. So yeah, but you can add those with StepZen. Yeah, I know you can do it with @REST. It's just a matter of if you can do it with @GraphQL, which is the cool part about this is, it's bringing together @REST directive and the @GraphQL directive, with Google Maps being the @REST and then being able to handle the @GraphQL with Yelp businesses. So to be determined on that one, but yeah, awesome capabilities.
Sweet. And then I'm going to drop a couple links in the chat for some blog posts that we have recently written that show off some of these capabilities. And I did one that I'll be going through on an upcoming workshop in a couple weeks or maybe a month or so, where what I did was I took the Dev2 API and the Google Natural Language Processing API to do what's called sentiment analysis. And sentiment analysis is when you feed in a piece of text and they tell you the quote unquote polarity of it, basically like how positive or negative it is. And then we use StepZen's @sequence directive to query for the comments of a Dev2 blog post. And you can take those comments and then feed them into the sentiment analysis and then find out like how positive or negative your blog comments were. So what I said is find out like how was your hot take too spicy or not is what I was saying. So that's the kind of stuff that once you start thinking about like how to chain these APIs together and what you can do with it, like you can get really creative and start to do some really cool stuff like with very, very little work and little code. And then I dropped Lucia's in there as well. Do you want to talk just briefly about what your example was?
Yeah, it integrated Dev2, Twitter, and GitHub. And the template that you make with it is kind of like a custom portfolio site generator with information from your profile on all of those, from all of those platforms, right? But the fun thing about it is that it works with Netlify's deploy to Netlify button in order to make it so that you can also make a generator for other people to generate their own custom portfolio websites. So it's working with that static platform to kind of insert a little dynamic fun.
Awesome. Yeah, and then as we're closing it out here, is there anything else you two want to talk about or anything you're kind of excited about for like as we continue like build out the studio and like new things that may be in the pipeline?
Anthony, I'm very excited. I did a tacos in Coconut Grove, Miami, and I'll share it with you guys so you can see it. I know. I saw the comments and I was like, "Ooh, I have some hate in this comment section over here."
So is the best, but we can accommodate tacos as well.
Yeah, right. Here we go.
Ooh, El Taquito.
Yeah, so El Taquito came in, and that's just the first one that came up on this location here for El Taquito. So, you get the address there, and then hole in the wall. So there you go. Your taco joint hole in the wall, as everyone loves to be able to find in all their local areas. So.
I like that there was a little typo there because that like represents holes in the walls in my heart. It's like just the best food comes out of those. Like a hole in the wall.
And it shows that the data's real because we wouldn't fake type. Yeah.
That would be a lot of work
yeah. Also, I wanted to just say for this one, so people kind of know what's going on. This is a post, right? You're sending a post here. So for Postman, just giving a quick rundown there. And then in here, I did a bunch of enters because I didn't know how to drop this down low enough. But I have my variables in here. So just know if you ever come in here, you have to add these variables, right? And you have to be able to actually pass in your keys if you take this to an outside source outside of just the studio, because the studio handled that for us in there. But in here, you'd have to actually pass those keys in there again if you take it to like a third, like something like Postman. That's all I wanted to say. So if anyone else has anything else,
yeah, just going to drop a couple links in the chat for our StepZen.com if you want to learn more about us. And then we also have a Discord. We'd love to see you there and hang out with us. If you're building anything, we'd love to see that. And you can keep up with as we're doing these live streams and putting out other content about this. This is really like just the beginning. Like this was like just last week is when we put this out. So we're all very, very excited here on the team about this. And we're going to be continuing to do more workshops and live streams and blogs about what you can do with it. And if there's anything you'd be interested in learning about or APIs you think would be cool to integrate, we would love to hear from you and love to know what you're interested in building. And then also keeps tuned for Lucia's Advent of Code that will be doing soon.
Yeah,
very excited.
Advent of Code, that's a separate thing. But Advent and GraphQL. Yeah.
Advent of GraphQL, correct. Yes, there we go. It's a play on Advent of Code.
It all comes together. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you, Travis and Isaac and Ben, for being here. And we will be doing this next week, same time, every Friday at noon Pacific time. And yeah, that's all for now. Bye, everyone.